to have the ability to present speech number 6 to this awesome group of articulators. Welcome, Gary. Awesome.
Thank you. You know, I really guess I should read the objectives before I write the speech. I thought this was on emotions, but we too shall get through this. But the goal of my talk today is to focus on emotions and vocal variety in a speech. I thought about this at length and struggled because I'm not the most emotional of persons when I talk, and therefore I don't have the vocal variety that I always have as well. So what I decided to do is go back to a time, an emotional time in my life, because when I was thinking about this, I thought that when you're trying to convey emotion in a speech or vocal variety, and you're not the most emotional of persons, it's kind of an emotional challenge. So I want to tell a little bit of a story of a time period in my life that was filled with emotion, and also it's a kind of a period of time when parents maybe have some fear about the welfare of their children as well. Well, during my early years, I was in the Boy Scouts of America, Chicago, Illinois, Troop 168. Great organization, just an awesome experience for me in my life. And it was when I was in about the 6th to the 8th grade, and I remember that we would get these things called merit badges. And what a merit badge is you go out and learn something. We learned first aid, we learned whittling, which is carving wood, 6-year-olds with knives. And what we would do is, based on that learning experience, we would be awarded a merit badge. And I was fortunate enough to have several of these merit badges. We also would go camping and other such things. And I remember one winter camping trip in specific from Chicago to Wisconsin. Now that I think of it, that's really, really cold to warmer in Wisconsin. But anyway, it was a winter camping trip, and we would go with 20 or so of our closest friends. And the place that we went to, it was just an awesome place. We would go tobogganing down the hills, sledding down the hills. It had this huge, if you remember, Ponderosa type fireplace there. We would cook outdoors, and basically we bonded with a lot of our friends there as well. Also, we were mentored by this group of upstanding young men and older men in the community, or at least so we thought. Enter Leonard R. Elliott Jr. I'll never forget that name. He joined our troop as what's called a Jazzman, J-A-S-M-A-N, which means Junior Assistant Scoutmaster. He was about, I don't know, maybe about 19 or 20 years old or so, and he took an active interest in the lives of the young men there. He endeared himself to the parents, he endeared himself to the Scoutmasters, he endeared himself to the leaders from the church that supported our group. Leonard, or Skip as he was called, I remember one particular camping trip that we all went on to a place called Camp Galena, Illinois. And this place was beautiful. I mean, just wilderness and trees everywhere. We went caving, we went hiking, we cooked outdoors. And Galena had this lovely silver, bluish gray stone called, guess?
Galena.
Galena, very good, very good. I don't know what it was used for, but it was some type of crystal used someplace industrially. But I digress a little bit. The weekend began normally, as they always do. We arrived on a Friday evening. Under the tutelage of our scoutmaster, Mr. Rick Hines, we unloaded the tents, we pitched our tents, we secured the food, we gathered wood, we started a fire, and Friday went on pretty normally. Saturday, we explored the area. We hiked several miles, we basically had a good time. Saturday evening, it started to rain. And it started to rain, obviously pretty heavy. And the tents that we had, all except the Scoutmaster's tent, they were waterproof as long as they didn't get wet. Oh. And needless to say, we got soaked. And one thing I remember is that evening, some of the boys were so soaked. I mean, we were pretty much just wet on our back halves. The floor of the tent, the sleeping bags and everything were just soaked. And Skip came out and he picked up a couple of the boys and he took them away that evening because they were so wet. Well, the next morning the boys came back and they came back in dry clothing, and the remainder of the weekend went pretty normally. A few weeks later, we had a ceremony called a drumming out of the core ceremony, if anyone's familiar with what that is. And what that really meant is that Skip was kicked out of the Boy Scouts for what he had done that weekend. And I really didn't know the extent of what had happened until several years later when I talked to an old friend of mine. I went to a private school, so we had pretty much the same kids for 9 years, or the 8 through Head Start. I wasn't in elementary school 9 years, but from Head Start through 8th grade. So we had the same children. And I ran into this guy through his sister on Facebook, and I didn't realize the extent of the anger that he still held. And one thing that he said to me is that his words were, he wanted Skip's demise to be Old Testament biblical. And what he said was, and hopefully I'll get this right, he says, I hope that expletive deleted burns in the fiery part of hell for all eternity.
Wow.
Comes to find out that Skip was a sexual predator. And the boys he had taken away that evening on that camping trip had told their parents about it, and they were outraged. Apparently Skip had been molesting several, apparently Skip had been molesting several of the little boys in the community. And this disgusting person would prey on the innocence of youth and molest these young boys. All of this happened in the mid to late 70s, and like I said, I didn't find out until I spoke with my friend. But my point is this: we as a society, we must not allow our most precious gifts to succumb to the evils of society. We must always be vigilant and aware of who and what our children are with. And just because an activity is made for children doesn't mean that it's safe. Some of you know me, I sell insurance for a living, and I hosted a booth at a church here in Central Florida last year sometime. And there was a single guy out there. You know when someone just doesn't look right? There was a single guy out there. Well, it comes to find out that this guy was on the sexual predator database here in Central Florida. So my point is this: watch your children, know what they're doing, know who they're with, and let's protect our most precious resource. Mr. Toast.